近日，中共中央、国务院印发《横琴粤澳深度合作区建设总体方案》。新形势下，做好横琴粤澳深度合作区开发开放，是为澳门长远发展注入的重要动力，有利于推动澳门长期繁荣稳定和融入国家发展大局。方案提出，发展促进澳门经济适度多元的新产业，其中建设中葡国际贸易中心和数字贸易国际枢纽港，推动传统贸易数字化转型，充分发挥澳门对接葡语国家的窗口作用，支持合作区打造中国葡语国家金融服务平台等，受到海外投资者高度关注。那么，澳门在打造中葡金融服务平台上有何优势？发展前景如何？全球财经连线稍早前专访了前葡萄牙外交部对外贸易和投资促进国务秘书高德志先生。
财经热点深度解读，这里是全球财经连线。大家好，今天我们邀请到的嘉宾是前葡萄牙外交部对外贸易和投资促进国务秘书高德志先生。高德志长期致力于将葡萄牙的优秀企业及产品介绍到中国，同时也是中资投资欧洲市场的坚定支持者，对中葡、中欧双边贸易发展有独到见解。Mr. Oliveira,You had worked in the Macau government for years and had witnessed the process of Macau's return to China. From your observation, what are the important changes that impressed you after Macau's return to China?
Macau has changed a lot indeed since 1999. In general overview, I'd say that Macau is today a more open, international and cosmopolitan city than it was before. To a large extent, that comes from the autonomy that Macau enjoys, and obviously, it stems also from the fact that the liberalization of the casino gaming industry brought in several operators from different parts of the world, and many people from many countries that came to work in many areas, and this made Macau really a more blended, interesting place. The second thing that changed is the relevance of Macau as an entertainment and leisure center. Macau was more entertainment and leisure center until 1999, and with the opening of casino gaming, it became, and with all the other activities that came along with it, in terms of tourism, entertainment, leisure, it became one of the main hubs in the world. I think we are still at the initial process of seeing that transformation, but it is already quite visible. The third main change, I'd say, lies in the fact that Macau, although it had already been spoken in the past, it had never been assumed as an added value as a platform between China and the Portuguese-speaking countries. Many times people think about Brazil because of the size of the country, the size of the population. But the reality is that in 2040, there will be 400 million people in countries. And the two main ones in Africa are going to grow, and by the end of the century, they're going to be bigger than Brazil combined. So in reality, it is huge potential for Macau, especially if you think it as Chinese public policy makers usually do in the long term. And so the setting up of a platform, of Macau as a platform, and setting up Macau Forum as an entity that has an institutional responsibility to do it has been a major change. Again, in the future, we will realize how big a change it was. Now, when we leave it, as it is usual, many people still do not understand that they are in the middle of a huge change. The fourth thing that is relevant is that Macau's GDP really grew up significantly. So this allowed the Macau government to have a reserve fund. It allowed the Macau government to give back more to the local communities, and this had never been the case in the past. Then it's The fifth change, I'd say, it has to do with the traditional industries. In the 20s, Macau still had some textile industry. So obviously, the change in terms of traditional industry meant that obviously there was a delocation of those industries to other places. And so that was also a very, very significant change. We are seeing in the north of the city, we are seeing a phenomenon similar to what happened in New York many years ago, where you have industrial buildings will become empty and you probably need to adjust them to other purposes. Then also, with more wealth also came a higher cost of living. So today, that is one of the problems that Macau has, obviously, that it has to cope with. And finally, I think that Macau gradually, steadily, and inevitably became, its economy turned from an economy towards the outside to an economy that became more and more integrated with the Chinese mainland economy. And that is only natural, and there are huge opportunities. The SEPA agreement that China entered with, or that the central government actually entered with Hong Kong and with Macau, each of them separately, they brought in fantastic opportunities, and they worked as catalyzers towards the integration with the mainland economy.
Macau's economy is relatively dependent on a few industries. The government is committed to promoting a moderately diversified development of Macau's economy. In your opinion, what advantages and opportunities does Macau have in developing new industries?
The goal of diversifying Macau's economy has been on the table for some time. It obviously needed to be diversified from the main industry, and obviously the delocation of the traditional industries started 3 decades ago at least. So the problem is that Macau has limited resources and limited and scarce qualified manpower and corporate knowledge. And sometimes people feel embarrassed about this. There should be no embarrassment. It's a small city with limited resources. That's it. And it should be assumed then that is one of the problems. Now, in the first, I'd say that there are 2 areas that are more or less obvious that are in the front line for diversification. The first one are the areas of tourism, entertainment, and leisure, because they are in line with the main industry in Macau, and that's where diversification has already started. And Macau has a very active role. The Macau authorities and the Macau Tourism Board has a very active role, for instance, in the regional tourism organizations, and that will continue to be the case. And in that area, I would say that this comes natural. The second area are areas that come from the outline development plan for the Greater Bay Area. Those outlines, those guidelines are to be followed, and they obviously, they are issued by the central government. They result from extensive talks along the years between several entities, especially the regional, the Guangdong provincial government, Hong Kong, the financial center in Shenzhen. It is important the business community pays attention to it, because that is going to be the general framework. Then, in 2016, and one of the main goals, one of the main guidelines enshrined in the development plan is the one that had already been set out in the speech of the Premier Li Keqiang at the time of the interministerial session of the Macau Forum in 2016.
Yes.
And pointing to Macau as a platform for financial services. At the time, still linked only with the purpose of the Macau Forum, that is to say, to increase foreign trade and investment between China and the Portuguese-speaking countries. Later on, as one sees the outline development plan for the Greater Bay Area, it is clear that it is possible that the role is a bit bigger, but it needs to be articulated, obviously, with the other financial centers that already exist, as are Hong Kong and Shenzhen. And in my opinion, there is potential for a small financial center and something that whose steps are starting now, but there is potential there. If for no other reason, because Macau is the only other part of China, apart from Hong Kong, that is a free port, a free city, and a place where there is free flow of capital, and with a capitalist system. So there are ways of taking advantage of that, and in my opinion, that will be one of the greatest ways of taking advantage of the diversification. The Macau government has also been incentivizing, as many governments elsewhere, startup centers, incubators, and several means to incentivize innovation and technology. If this is done in a smart manner, you can attract a very good pool of talent, and Macau definitely has to be appealing so that young entrepreneurs come and settle and set up shop or set up base there. And this is and the same goes for the creative industries roles. It is something. Macau has several areas where there are intentions of diversifying, but where it is difficult to see where we are going. Then in others, things are already rolling, and especially, I would say, follow the guidelines of the Greater Bay Area, because those are the areas where, for instance, the financing community is going to look into. It's going to be easier to finance those things. It's going to be easier to integrate that with the neighboring areas.
The proposal and implementation of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area strategy provides a major opportunity for Macau to build a Sino-Portuguese platform and for cooperation between China and Portuguese-speaking countries. Do you have any suggestion on how Portuguese-speaking countries can use Macau to better connect with the Chinese market?
The Macau Forum has been doing a great job there. First, it has been introducing the potential of each of the countries in different parts of China, so that, especially in the way that China is now organizing its internal market now, really into megalopolis markets, and it has been doing a tremendous job, and that has allowed most of the countries to present themselves to Chinese companies in a way that otherwise would be complicated to do. It is possible to do more, but when you think about the country with the greatest potential, as is the case of Brazil, Brazil traditionally has had an approach of thinking that it should do things directly with, for instance, the entities, the central entities, and the relevant regional entities. So sometimes it has not worked well with the Macau Forum. In the last years, I think Brazil realized that it has much to gain to integrate itself with the Macau Forum. But this is to say that the potential is there, and a lot of work, especially in terms of awareness on the one hand, and creating an institutional network is a very good start. Then it is necessary to do, I think, more in terms of, as you yourself have pointed, in terms of the entrepreneurial side of things. Yeah. This is where I believe that we have to understand. I mean, the Macau Forum is led by MOFCOM, and MOFCOM is a governmental entity. We should not expect MOFCOM to be the entity with the highest sensitivity in entrepreneurial issues. I mean, for these, we have, for instance, the Federation of Industry and Commerce in several of the main areas of China. What we need to do is to integrate the work at the entrepreneurial side with the business associations in China, so that we on the one hand, they can realize the potential that exists in different sectors for Chinese companies, but also in finding ways to promoting partnerships and introducing several of those main markets to Portuguese-speaking countries' companies. You must realize that with the exception of Brazil, of some Brazilian companies, companies even from Portugal, and from all the other Portuguese-speaking countries. When they looked at the Chinese market, they got scared because it's such a huge market. It's far away. You need to operate in Chinese, and the way doing business is not always the same. So many people they thought that many companies thought they did not have a chance. So nowadays, with the split of the markets, really, today you don't need to look for a distributor in all of China. If you can work in the Greater Bay Area, you will find a distributor of your product in that area. The Yangtze River Delta, it's already a very big area, but in the Beijing, Tianjin, and Hebei area, yes, you will be able to find. Today, it's easier. The way the market is being segmented, it's easier for outside entities. Also, China had a great initiative with the import fairs, the trade fairs, or the import fairs, realizing that it is important to also open the Chinese market to that in that extent to foreign companies and helping them to understand how and to connect with potential partners or suppliers or buyers. And to this extent, I'd say that what we need now are more concrete actions. We need more seminars, more workshops on specific issues, and I myself am trying to do my share of it. And several chambers of commerce are being particularly active. The biggest potential, in my opinion, that companies from Portuguese-speaking countries have in China nowadays is to use e-commerce platforms that China has, like Dong or Tmall. This is something that, the Chinese urban market is a very appealing market. It's probably 850 million people. In a few years, it will be 1 billion people. But it is especially appealing because the costs of operating there are not very high. And urban China today, if you want to rent a shop and if you want to start a business that you want to expand, probably a brick and mortar business is very expensive. So, but with these e-commerce platforms, it is really, for the first time, it's possible to set up a business where if you have a good product, if you are ingenious, if you have a decent marketing, if you hire a local consultant to understand how to make the marketing to Chinese consumers, you can succeed and you can enter the Chinese market. So this is the main area where I've been advising companies from Portuguese-speaking countries to look.
In recent years, the cooperation between China and Portugal within the framework of the Belt and Road has achieved fruitful results. The cooperation has gone beyond a bilateral scope, and there have been many cooperations in markets like Europe, Africa, and Latin America. What can we expect from further cooperation in the future?
The Portuguese governments, irrespective of their political colors, they have always been supportive of the Belt and Road Initiative. And in my opinion, when I was in the government, and what I tried to do was to promote a new maritime route. It's a maritime route that makes sense in terms of costs. And the idea was actually brought to me by the entity that manages the Ningbo harbor. And with the enlargement of the Panama Canal, you have now boats, the post-Panamax boats, that those vessels, they make it cheaper to bring products from the Far East, China, Japan, Korea, to Europe, rather than from the traditional way. So the problem with implementing that, and China liked the idea, but the Portuguese and Chinese governments liked the idea. The problem here is that it will take time to implement, in the sense that it will be dependent on the rhythm, on the pace of construction of the post-Panamax. In any case, it requires new ports available for this in Western Europe, and one of those main ports is in Portugal, Sines, and that's why Portugal also, the Portuguese government was interested. But apart from that, I would say that in one of the, although Portugal is very small when compared with China, Portugal has two areas where Chinese companies are particularly interested. One is the traditional good network that Portuguese companies have in Africa and Latin America. And this is why I always have been an upholder of the tripartite entrepreneurial cooperation. And when the Portuguese Prime Minister visited China in 2016, I signed with the Minister of Commerce of China, Mr. Gao. I signed an agreement to promote that tripartite agreement. And that tripartite agreement is important. But of course, I mean, companies must realize that they have benefits from it. You're not going to impose it on the companies. And it's something that does not stem from, it's not nothing new that is being invented. But we need to introduce this potential to the companies, because sometimes companies have different needs, and if you know what those needs are, you can match the companies and make a venture or a partnership. But sometimes they don't really realize that there's someone else that could, be complementary to them in terms of helping. And I believe that there's still some room to work in that field. And but this is something that it is more relevant for large projects rather than small ones. To be fair. Said, it's possible also. For instance, one of the things I'm exploiting now is the possibility of doing a partnership between a company in an African country, a Portuguese company there, that already works there and has. I'd say today is half Portuguese, half that African country, and they are doing. For instance, they are doing renewable energy, solar power plants, for instance. And the Portuguese have a lot of knowledge. The Portuguese companies have a lot of knowledge on the use of renewable technologies, especially in wind and solar power plants. And the problem is, to do that venture in that country, you will need to have funding that neither they nor the Portuguese companies have. Now, in the past, the simple thing would be you try to bring in one of the giant companies from China in construction, for instance, ones or provincial ones. Today, you have that possibility, but you also have the possibility, for instance, of making a partnership with a Chinese company that provides, for instance, that becomes a partner on that joint venture, and you issue, for instance, green bonds, because this is for to produce green energy, and you issue green bonds in renminbis in Shenzhen, and in the future, hopefully, in Macau. So this is the kind of thing that, when you think in terms of combining the different components, that they have potential. They are in line with several of the goals, in this case, that China has: internationalization of the renminbi, creating a small financial market targeting the Portuguese, the relationship between China and Portuguese-speaking countries. But it needs to start with one or two concrete cases. And I'm really hopeful that this is an area where we're going to see results in several months.
The COVID-19 pandemic hit the global economy severely, and countries around the world are actively promoting a green recovery. China and Portugal have pledged to achieve carbon neutrality targets in 2060 and 2050. What do you think are the opportunities for cooperation between the two countries in the field of green and low carbon development?
Yes, I think there are several opportunities, and the fact that even before those target deadlines were publicized, Portugal was already investing heavily in wind and solar plants, and we are lucky that it is precisely in the field of energy that we have perhaps the most successful partnership between a Chinese and a Portuguese company, which is a partnership between Shrines Three Gorges and EDP. And that partnership has extended to different parts of the world. It has been, for CTG, it has been a successful case of internationalization. Then we have the possibility also of exploiting or using or looking into opportunities in Europe. The Green Deal in Europe is a big thing. And also, we have had many companies in Portugal, many companies from abroad, especially from the Far East, but I would say especially from China, coming to set up shop in creating or being part of partnerships to make in solar power plants. And I would say that in the last one, especially as regards the fact that you are going to have very small, very low costs of energy in southern Portugal in a few years, what I would say is that many energy intensive companies from Europe are going to delocate, and I assume that many others from other parts of the world will come there. The fact that Chinese companies already have a foot there will make several of them realize this potential. But awareness is something that comes with time. If you have your company there and you have a manager there to make a solar power plant, that's what he's focused in. But sooner or later, this potential will be realized, and I think that we are going to have many more entities, especially companies that are energy intensive, coming to a place that traditionally used to be a peripheral area in Europe.
感谢高德志先生。好的，今天我们的节目就到这里了，下期再会。